Well then, just when I had finally settled on which espada is probably my absolute favorite, His Majesty was taken from me. But what an ending it was. So let's get into it. Where we last left off, the Visored had come to help in the battle, and some of them teamed up with our Soul Reapers to help take down the Espada. Hachi, for instance, joined up with Soifon and Omaida against King Baraggan. They've been struggling against his power to age people rapidly, but Hachi's been studying him and believes he might stand a chance, trapping Baraggan in one of his Keto barriers. We've seen how strong these force fields can be, but Baraggan destroys his confinement with a touch, and dropping a very cold line that continues to highlight how powerful he is. This was such a cool way of immediately showing that the reinforcements might not be able to swoop in and save the day so easily. Baraggan's monologue about the very concept of eternity and permanence being ridiculous and spawned out of fear of aging is an interesting way of looking at things, but I get it from his perspective. He points out how everything ages, whether it's people, plants, machinery, or even Soul Reaper abilities. Nothing lasts forever. Hachi comes up with a plan, but needs Soifon's help, but her reluctance continues to show us how the Visored and Urahara are viewed by the people they used to fight alongside. There is a lot of unresolved tension and issues, and the way they view the Visored is just a little skewed by how things went down with the Soul Society. And I'm glad that there is this underlying tension between these two groups. Still, they're up against a common enemy, and they have to find a way to figure it out. And in this case, their enemy is just very, very powerful, and it's going to take teamwork to stop it. Listen, I've made it clear how much I love Baraggan these last few videos, and he is undeniably arrogant. But that's part of his charm, because it's such an integral part of his character to such an incredible degree. He compares himself to a god and laughs off anyone that even tries to threaten him. It's all just very comical to him, extremely comical. He believes he holds power over the great equalizer, the idea that aging trumps everything else because it is an absolute. So to him, everyone else are just insignificant little ants that pale in comparison. And because he looks down on his enemies, he doesn't really see it coming when they figure out a way to try to get to him. First, they put him into a box where he can't avoid Soifon's Bankai missile this time. That was awesome, and seemed like it was enough, but Baraggan refused to go down like that. He not only refused, but he seemed to truly believe that it was impossible for someone of his stature to be defeated by anyone he viewed as beneath him. And it's a moment of me reading going, well, that didn't work. Now what are we supposed to do? Because Baraggan believes himself to be unstoppable and that his power is absolute. And for a second, it really feels that way. But then Hachi severs his own decaying arm and puts it inside of Baraggan. He realized that Baraggan's power is so great and so unstoppable that it is the only thing that can stop him, the only thing that can cancel itself out. But he had to get through his defenses, making him inadvertently hurt himself with his own abilities. It was very smart and caught me off guard, a clever way to defeat such a crazy power. As Baraggan starts to succumb to his injuries, we're shown a little bit of his life. We get into a flashback taking place in Hueco Mundo, where we get a glimpse of what it was like under Baraggan's rule. And it seemed pretty boring, even for its king. And yes, this confirms that Baraggan was indeed the literal king of Hueco Mundo, and the god king of all hollows, which I should have realized sooner, given his crown, but I'd only started to really consider recently. And from the little we're shown, he's a much less ambitious ruler than his eventual usurper. I can't really speak toward his royal decrees, or his policies, or his popularity with the masses, but this does feel right for the king of the hollows. He just sits on his throne holding court with hollows bowing before him, all day long it seems. And while he is vocally bored and might be interested in starting a war to liven things up, he doesn't seem like he wants to actually get up and really do anything. Hueco Mundo back then was fittingly hollow, devoid of any excitement, to the point that Baraggan was contemplating having his own army split up and fight each other. The Palace of Las Noches itself is different too, more of a ruin than how it is nowadays after Aizen's renovations. And speaking of Aizen, we are shown the first meeting between Baraggan and Aizen, and it is a very telling one. It was cool to actually see some of the time when Aizen was transitioning into his current seat of power. In this case, showing his effort to overthrow Hueco Mundo with a single conversation, pretty much. He showed up with Gin and Tozen and immediately made his presence known with a little bit of violence. It's weird to think that back then they were probably doing this on their day off from work, or while they were supposed to be home. Hell, I wouldn't have been surprised if the Soul Reapers back in the Serete thought that they were there the whole time, thanks to Aizen's hypnosis, when they were actually over here conquering a whole other dimension. Really badass, really fun to see. But yeah, the treacherous Soul Reapers just take a casual trip to invade Hueco Mundo and cause an insurrection. I do love how Baraggan presents himself here on his seat of power. His words about the palace not needing a roof because the sky itself is his roof was great, and really shows how he viewed his authority as a king. Hollows worshipped him as a god, and he's arrogant enough to buy into all of that. He probably wasn't ambitious because he thought that there was nothing higher than what he'd already achieved. But Aizen offered another way, a chance to do something more, but that would require serving him. And while Baraggan was resistant, we know how this all turns out. He eventually bends the knee, whether he wants to or not. I just loved that these chapters showed how Aizen conquered the Hollows, even if it was just a brief glimpse, because it really highlights just how quickly Hueco Mundo fell to Aizen's influence. It's something I've wondered about for a long time. Naturally, he did it in a firm, conversational way, all the while hypnotizing Baraggan without Baraggan even realizing what was happening. It just makes sense for Aizen to have conquered the Hollows this way, and I loved it so much. One of the most interesting things that Aizen points out to him is that Baraggan almost looks like a Soul Reaper with his giant weapon, and probably the fact that he doesn't really look much like any other Hollow that we've seen. This is interesting on a number of levels. We've talked about how Baraggan does seem to be based off of like a Grim Reaper or death itself, like that kind of aesthetic, which obviously shares some similarities to the concepts of Soul Reapers and Shinigami, so on a meta level, he does bear some similarities to Reapers. In story, I think it's even more fascinating that Aizen is pointing this out. He knows that it's probably derogatory to call the King of the Hollows a Soul Reaper, or to even compare him at all to one, so he's using it as an insult even though Aizen himself is a Soul Reaper. This is very telling to me because Aizen saying it makes it seem like Aizen thinks of Soul Reapers in a lesser way, like he believes that he's not one himself anymore or is somehow beyond what he originally was. This makes sense given his ambitions to be above all, but it's interesting to note that even at that point, Aizen seemed to look down on his old life and everyone in it, and possibly views himself as something else entirely. For instance, when Baraggan asks what they are since they obviously aren't Hollows, he suggests that his intruders could be humans or Soul Reapers, but Aizen doesn't respond. Is it more than just believing himself to be better? Has he become something else? We know Aizen experiments with holification, so it's possible that the Visored were just, the first steps towards using those kinds of experiments on himself, maybe. It just feels like he's not a Soul Reaper because he doesn't seem to really consider himself to be one. I don't know. Baraggan obviously takes great pride in not just being a Hollow, but being the greatest of all Hollows. Whereas Aizen conquers the Hollows as a Soul Reaper, sort of, maybe not, but doesn't belong to either faction really, not even in his own mind. The Soul Reapers and the Hollows are all just instruments for Aizen to use to compose his grand symphony. But is Aizen the truly arrogant one? They both believe themselves to be above everyone else. Aizen wants to be at the very top above everything. The only difference between them is that Baraggan has now been shown to not be as untouchable as he claims, while Aizen keeps rising higher and higher. They're both arrogant. They both have very inflated egos, but Aizen seems to be the one that's willing to actually put in the work and make the effort to prove that he's better than everyone else. For Baraggan, he may still wear a crown and still be considered a king by his followers, but we've clearly seen that he's been reduced to one of Aizen's Espada, and isn't even the number 1 ranked. My friend who has read Bleach multiple times and has helped me with some of these videos asked me after I read this if I think Aizen was being petty and put Baraggan at number 2 instead of number 1 just to spite him. And I'm not really sure where I stand on that. I can see it. It's a funny way of looking at it, especially knowing how much that no doubt infuriates Baraggan. We've seen how he likes to take command back the second Aizen is indisposed. Like, the moment Aizen was stuck behind the fire, Baraggan whipped out his throne and took charge of the army. He completely went over the number 1's authority, probably because he knew Stark wouldn't step up, but he fell right back into his role as leader. There's a reason I thought he was number 1 for so long, because he feels like he should be. And he should be. He is the God King of Waco Mundo, okay? Show him some respect. But really, all of this was Baraggan showing us how desperate he is to be back in his old position. But he was never going to get it back. No, when it comes down to it, Baraggan's reign as king ended the moment Aizen set foot in his palace, but Baraggan is too proud to truly accept that or admit to it, even when it's so obvious that he's been usurped. He can wear his crown as much as he wants, he can claim to be the king, he can have his underlings refer to him as their king and bow before him, and he can bring his throne around and show it off to the masses, but he's not the king anymore, sadly. He's not in charge as much as he wants to be, and it's clear how much that probably really bothers him. So would Aizen put someone as prideful as Baraggan at number 2 just to upset him? I could see it. But maybe that's me still coping with the fact that Baraggan isn't number 1, because he should be! Anyway, as Kubo brings us back to modern day, Baraggan is moments away from destruction. He's fading away into nothing, but in his final moments, he looks across the battlefield at Aizen, at the man that changed his whole world, just like he said he would. But for Baraggan, Aizen didn't change it for the better. Baraggan, despite barely even still existing, takes his last few seconds to throw his weapon at Aizen. This is one last act of defiance from someone that had their life and power stolen from them. Aizen came in and took his throne, and Baraggan has no doubt hoped and waited for a chance to get it back. But unfortunately for him, his weapon disintegrates with the rest of him before it even reaches Aizen. Aizen doesn't even bother to look. He just keeps his back turned in the most disrespectful way as Baraggan dies. It's such a callous moment where it's made clear that Aizen's relationships with these Espada, good or bad, don't matter to him. They are all just tools to be used until they're obsolete. And Baraggan had become obsolete. It was interesting to see Stark and Harabel react to Baraggan's death, and take note that Aizen didn't seem to care at all about his number 2. I'm sure they all realize they're all expendable in the grand scheme of Aizen's master plan, but to see that firsthand is probably a little difficult to really stomach. All that was left of Baraggan was the crown of a dead king. So yeah, we've reached the end of Baraggan, and I'm gonna miss him, since I'm pretty sure he might be my absolute favorite Espada. He was awesome, and while he might not have been given the most page time or given significant development or anything, that wasn't really the point of his character. Baraggan was used to show the last vestige of the old ways, of the hollows before Aizen, a remnant of a different era that has been forced to linger in a new age, haunting the world as it starts to move on without him, where he was stuck in a place without significant sway. Whatever authority he had, whatever purpose, was taken from him, and while he may have seemed resigned to his fate, just in denial about his reduced role, his final moment showed that he wanted more than anything to take his throne back and to unseat the usurper that took it from him. Baraggan was the idea of the older generation personified, trying to remain relevant and in control while time left him behind for new things to come. He seemed to believe that he was still in his prime, still the current king, but Baraggan, like all things, grew old, and now fades away for whatever comes next as his reign passes into memory. So ends the age of Baraggan. I'll miss the Hollow King, but nothing lasts forever. And that's where I've stopped reading for now. I need time to mourn the fallen monarch. I need to set up a royal funeral, find a proper place to lay a world leader to rest, and then grieve for a very long time, and find a way to accept that my new favorite hollow is now gone. I thought it would be a nice tribute to my favorite skeleton Hollow King if we gave him a little bit of a funeral, a little bit of an in memoriam tribute. So I asked you guys to share some of your favorite memories of King Baraggan in memory of his life and his existence within the story. And here are some of things people were saying for this funeral reception. It's with a heavy heart that I'm going to read these touching tributes to the God King of Hueco Mundo. Greatest Bleach design ever, bro. When I first saw the resurrection, my jaw dropped. Honestly, top 3 character designs ever in anime, in my opinion. That's a bold claim, but it is a great design. I love his design. Maybe you're right, but that's very kind of you to say about the late great king. His greatest accomplishment? Having such a nice set of teeth after centuries of ruling a world. Truly an example for all in regards to dental hygiene. Very important, very true. He had great teeth. I think we should absolutely remember him for that. Whenever I think of Baraggan and his fracciones, I think of them as an old father and his many sons. You know, I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're kind of right. It does feel a little bit like that. I wonder which of them was his favorite son. Arguably the pinnacle of Kubo's character designs in Bleach, and his power is one of the most dangerous in the entire series. So dangerous that not even Baraggan himself was safe from his own power. That's true, and I absolutely agree, one of the greatest designs in Bleach so far, and the power is terrifying. Legitimately, I talked about it before, but it feels like so much more dangerous than so many other abilities, because it feels just like raw death itself. Not like a Ceroblast that's gonna cause things to explode, just natural, unavoidable power, if that makes sense. I agree. Him chasing Omaida around and messing with him was pretty funny. Was also pretty sad to hear the VA passed away. I hadn't heard that. That is sad. Rest in peace. Just the bar that he drops in his flashback. I don't need a roof. I am a king. For me, all of the sky of Hueco Mundo is the roof of my castle. I agree, they don't call him Baraggan for nothing. Okay, he drops bars, and he has some great lines, and that line was really powerful and said a lot about him. It was great. The Baraggan moment that had the most impact on me is probably how, after all of the demonstration of his might, Omaida considers him even more dangerous than Aizen. I thought that was interesting as well. Now, obviously, Omaida hasn't seen the pinnacle of Aizen's power. Like, I don't think any of us readers at this point have. I don't think his fellow Soul Reapers have. And also, Aizen is a little, disarming. He doesn't seem like that scary. So compared to, like, death itself, I could see why Omaida was much more intimidated, but I have a feeling that'll probably change in the future. My favorite moment was seeing how he got played like a fiddle by the mastermind Aizen. Listen, this is a respectful funeral, not a roast, okay? Easy, easy. I mean, you're right, he was played like a fiddle by Aizen, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about how he was the best, alright? He's the best. It's actually been foreshadowed a while ago that there was a king of Hueco Mundo back when the first Menos appeared, I think, or maybe early Arrancar arc, I don't remember, but if you're reading this, Mr. Agamotto, which I am, please include this fact. It's really interesting. I didn't remember that, but yeah, I'll have to look back and check that the King of Hueco Mundo was referenced back then, you're saying? It must have slipped past me, or I just don't remember it. That was a while ago. If that was when the first Menos appeared, that was like 2 years ago for me reading. So yeah, it's been a while. Maybe more like a year. I don't remember. It's been a while either way, but yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I didn't notice that. I wish I did. Then I would have been much more onto Baraggan's trail long before I was. And the final memory for this funeral. One time he saved my cat from a burning building. I love Baraggan. For real. That does sound like something our late great God King of Hueco Mundo would have done. What a hero. What an icon. We will all miss him dearly. Thank you, everyone. for attending this service as we all think about the life and times of King Baraggan. Long live the king. It's a shame, but his time had come, and just like Baraggan pointed out, nothing lasts forever. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll be in mourning about this for a while. Please comment, like, and subscribe. If you'd like to support the channel a little bit more, feel free to join as a member on the channel. Hope you all have a good day. See you next time. Take care. Bye.